Something is controlling my family. Please help us." "But Daddy, I'm not tired yet. I'm not." I turned around to see the wide green eyes of my little girl staring up at me. They tried desperately to stay open, but I watched as they slowly drooped and closed, only to snap back open. She clutched her light brown teddy bear to her chest and rubbed her left eye with her balled-up hand. Her long, thick curls bounced from side to side as she shook her head and refused to acknowledge my hand pointing upstairs to her bedroom. "Come on, Nugget, time to go to bed," I told her as I reached for her hand. She protested but accepted, and I let my 4-year-old daughter guide me up to her room. She brushed her teeth on her own, and I situated her bedclothes for her. Almost done in there. I called to her after the sound of the electric head had ceased for nearly a minute. A muffled response followed. "Almost. Gotta get my tongue too." I smiled warmly at the thought of her doing things by herself. She had grown up so fast. She trudged into the room and looked at her purple and green shirt and pants laid out before her. My favorite. She clutched the purple shirt and held it up, then turned to face me. "Daddy, we match." She pointed to my shirt. I had a purplish stain on my collar and around the cuff of my button-down. She giggled and held the shirt to her face. She inhaled deeply and turned to me. She was brow furrowed. "You can't look at me while I change." Her expression was deadly serious. "Excuse me. Teacher said it was bad." I rolled my eyes. "Fine. If you want to get dressed like a big girl all by yourself, you go right ahead." I stepped out of the room for a minute and closed the door. I heard her struggle and what sounded like a lamp fall. "Everything okay in there?" My hand went to the doorknob and I turned it. A strange odor wafted towards me. It was an acrid smell, like the sickly sweet odor of a fruit that had been out in the sun. "Daddy, wait. I can do it. Do you have food in your room? You know the rules about food in your room." A pause, then a giggle. I shrugged my shoulders and waited until I heard her cease her struggle. "All done." I came in to see her positively beaming. She stood at the foot of her bed with her arms outstretched. Her teddy propped on the edge of the bed. Her shirt was on backward and one pant leg was not quite rolled all the way down. "You're a mess, little nugget," I said as I admired the attempt. She giggled and hopped into bed. There it was again. That sugary sweet scent. What was that? I looked around the room to see if I could spot a source. "What have you been eating in your room?" "Nothing," she responded. "Tomorrow we will clean this room up and see." I wrapped the blankets up around her and tucked her in. "Wait, Mr. Pickles." She reached for the bear and grabbed it. She held it tight to her chest as I wrapped her back up. I confirmed she was nestled tightly in the blankets and reached for the lamp at her bedside. "No bedtime story." Her lips pouted as she pulled the blanket up to her chin. Mr. Pickles' beady black eyes stared at me with equal disappointment. "Okay, which one shall it be?" I muttered to myself as I turned and perused her bookshelf. "Piggies." I reached for her weathered and worn copy of 3 Little Pigs and sat down at her bedside. I noticed a coffee stain on the back of the book. I did not remember that from the last time I held it. She beamed at me as I opened the book and began to read. Her look of fear as I described how the wolf approached the house made of straw reminded me of the power of the whimsical mind of a child. The lamp at my daughter's bedside flickered. Then it flickered again and popped. The flash blinded me, and I was forced to close my eyes for a moment. I smelled industrial cleaner. Its pungent odor filled my nostrils and caused me to shake my head. My eyes opened and I realized I was in a hospital room, seated on the edge of a hospital bed. My daughter, my beautiful baby girl, sat next to me. I held her hand in mine as 3 little pigs rested in my other hand. It was cold. Her lovely curls were gone. Her scalp was bare. She appeared pale, with sunken cheeks, and she was so very thin. Tubes crisscrossed her body as machines beeped all around the room. The room was frigid like the inside of a walk-in freezer. I felt my body begin to shiver. A nurse approached and spoke to me. Her voice was muffled, like she was far away. Sir, it's time for her chemo. Sir, can you hear me? The nurse's words echoed and reverberated around the room, over and over. I'm sorry, what? I stood up and 3 little pigs tumbled to the floor. I bent to pick it up just as the nurse did. She knocked over my cup of coffee from the bedside table. It soaked the book cover entirely. Damn it, I am so sorry, she said as she wiped it down with a towel. The lights in the room flickered, once, then twice. My daughter reached out and touched my hand. Daddy. I was back in her bedroom. She held my hand. She was warm and vibrant and all smiles, if a bit confused. Why did you stop, Daddy? I shook the cobwebs loose from my mind. What the hell just happened? I noticed ripples of goose flesh on my arms. I was still cold. My veins in my arms looked blue, almost purple. But like a wave, the terrible memories were washed away like a dream. Daddy, are you okay? Never better, Nugget. She squeezed my hand tightly and I felt myself warm up. I finished her bedtime story and she drifted off to sleep. I did not know what happened, but I pushed the thought out of my mind and went downstairs to pour myself a drink. I uncorked the bottle of Cabernet and let it breathe, and I grabbed 2 plates from the cabinet. I saw the parking brakes of a car as it backed into the driveway and the sound of the garage door as it slid open. I walked to the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of red wine. I heard the doorknob turn and the jingle of keys as my wife walked into the mudroom. I turned the corner and met her gaze. She looked tired, weary. It must have been a tough day. I had not heard from her at all. I handed her the glass and held my own up. I know you've had a long day, sweetie. Dinner is ready whenever you are. Nugget is already washed up and in bed. You have nothing to do but relax now. Her eyes, tired and lined with dark circles, suddenly came alive. What did you just say? Her tone was angry, accusatory. I bristled at the way she spoke to me and became defensive. I'm sorry, but I thought you would be happy I took care of things for you. My tone carried more than a hint of dryness. How dare you? I saw fire in my wife's eyes now. They scrunched up and I saw hot tears form quickly as she shook her head, a look of disgust on her face when she finally opened them again. What the fuck is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? What's your problem? Things haven't been easy the last month or so. I did my best to be of help tonight. For the first time in 6 years of marriage, I shouted at my wife like she was my enemy. And why have things been so hard? She's been gone less than a month. But you stand there like nothing happened. And why the fuck did you get her bear out? While what? I looked down and saw I held Mr. Pickles. I stammered for words as I stared through my wife. Through the walls of the home and off into the distance. Memories flooded back to me. In waves, like a tidal wave of pain, of misery, images flash before my mind's eye. Her limp body as she fell in the yard, the hospital visits, the chemo, the sleepless nights and exhausted days, the tears and the screams, the funeral. I am brought back to earth by a sound, possibly something my wife said to me. I stared eye to eye with her. "Something is in this house, and it's pretending to be our child," I whispered to her. Her head tilted slightly as she pursed her lips, tears still on her cheeks, anger more at the forefront of her emotions. "Come with me." I led my wife upstairs and told her to keep her voice down. As we approached the bedroom door, the hairs on my arms stood up. "Whoa, that's weird." My wife's arms were covered in goose flesh as the house suddenly became bitterly cold. I pushed the door open slightly and we investigated the unnaturally dark bedroom. "Mommy." I saw her head snap up and her eyes bulged from her face. A look shock spread and paralyzed her entire body. The bedside lamp in the room flicked on. "Mommy, you look sad. Come sit with me." The thing that was my daughter rose from the bed. It appeared to float out of the sheets about a foot above it until I realized it was supported by a mass of tentacles. My daughter's body was a mutated mass of flesh. Secreted from an open pustule in the tentacle. The juicy goose seemed to have a mind of its own, like it wanted to find a human victim. The childish abomination yanked at her as I grabbed my wife by her other arm. Her face was a look of desperation and horror. More tentacles poured from where my child's fingers used to be and enveloped my wife's entire torso. I pressed against the door frame for leverage. I pulled with all my strength, but the fleshy monstrosity sprouted tentacle upon tentacle. They seized her legs and pulled us both backward. The wood of the door frame creaked and groaned in protest. "Help me!" she screamed as she was yanked from my grip. She smacked the floor hard, and blood leaked from her nostrils, and she was dragged across the carpet towards the bed. The tentacles retracted back into fingers, and the entity began to reform. It held my wife's hand gingerly like the child it pretended to be. I could see purple liquid begin to crawl up my wife's arm under the skin, like ink had formed and flowed in her veins. She stopped her resistance and sat down at the foot of the bed. The creature that looked like my sweet baby girl sat back down on the bed. It slowly transformed back into its human appearance. My wife stared at me with a warm smile on her face. The veins faded and